wonderful to see everybody here today, and super excited Dave could come. We've been friends for several years. We work together, farmer and chef, and our relation with the restaurant has looked different over the years, but we're pretty excited to just talk to you guys. And we're both talkers, so the presentation might go off script a little bit, but also it's a small group here, so if you guys have questions as we go along, just like feel free to sort of jump in. So part of the reason when I was talking to the Oak folks several months ago about presenting, I thought we hear a lot about CSAs, we hear a lot about farmers markets, a lot about wholesale, but restaurants are a huge market for farmers, and there's a lot of amazing chefs out there who are looking to work with local farmers. And so our hope is, by the end of the day today, or the end of the hour, you guys will be a little bit more prepared if you're thinking about selling to restaurants, or you're selling to restaurants now and just looking to up your production. So I'm just curious, is anybody in here selling directly to restaurants now? No? Kind of? Okay, great. That means there's a lot to learn today. So yeah, feel free to chime in with questions, and I'll just briefly introduce the farm, and then I'll have Dave talk about his restaurants, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty of all the sort of pro tips and what to do and what not to do when you're working with restaurants. So the picture there on the right is my farm, Darkwood Farm. So I'm going into my 9th growing season, but I've only done 1 year on my actual own farmland that I own. So over the years, I've leased 3 different pieces of land before I was finally able to buy a farm. But yeah, this is what we do. We're a highly diversified vegetable farm. My partner Ramon also grows mushrooms on the farm, and the pictures on the left are not my farms, but I just put them there. Before I started my own farm, I worked on farms. One of them was in Seattle, and one of them was in Sonoma County in California. And I put that up there just because the way that I farm and who I sell to is really kind of built on my experience working on other farms and seeing how people can really get local food into the food system. And so like Seattle, and Dave knows he lived in California, it's a huge local food scene. And I think we have so much room to grow here, especially in the northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area, but just like in general in the Midwest. I just wanted to point out that part of the reason I even thought about working with restaurants to begin with was because I worked on farms that sold a lot of produce to restaurants, and that sort of has informed the way that I farm and how I sell my produce.
This is Baker's Table. This is Chef Porter, my chef de cuisine with a 30-pound chicken of the woods mushroom. We opened the restaurant 3.5 years ago in Newport, Kentucky. I didn't mean to open a restaurant. I actually opened a restaurant partially because I met Annie. I moved to town I was in Oakland for 12 years as a cook, and I moved out here, and I saw her produce at the Findlay Farmers Market, and I just wanted to connect with what food was in Kentucky, because I just didn't understand, how it would be different. And I thought her food looked beautiful, and no farmers would let me come tour their farm. No farmers would engage with me. They just sort of shut me out. I approached 4 or 5 different stalls at the farmers market, and they all were just like, "We don't allow guests." And I thought, oh, that doesn't sound good. And then I met Annie, and her produce was gorgeous, and she said, "Yeah, come over next Tuesday."
And dig potatoes.
Yeah, so she was just very engaged, and the produce was exactly like what inspired me, and that's kind of a big part of why I opened a restaurant, because going to the farm was inspiring. And I sort of said to myself, if I'm going to do it, this should be at the center of what we do. So the restaurant's really an extension of being inspired by what comes out of the land. And kind of trying to do it as best as we can. We opened for dinner at the restaurant, which is the Baker's Table restaurant, and then we just opened the Baker's Table Bakery, which exclusively uses stone ground flour from Janie's Mill, which is the closest farmer miller we can find. They're out of Illinois. And we use farm ingredients to make pizzas too. So restaurant, bakery, that's what we do.
And I love like your motto, feed people with love, and that piece of art I put on there because it's a green meat radish.
It is, yeah.
And we grow those, and yeah, it's just like everything that Dave does is really based around the food and working with what is seasonal and what's in the moment, and it's expressed in not only the decor and the restaurant and everything too.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just want to show you guys this graph. So there's a lot of reasons why you may decide as a farmer to enter into a relationship working with restaurants and with chefs. But I think this is a pretty powerful graph that I found as I was putting the presentation together. So this is the amount of money spent in the US on food. And so you can see that it's about half between what's spent on food at home versus food away from home, which includes restaurants, cafeterias, all of those things. And so I think we spend a lot of time as farmers, especially when we want to work directly with customers, thinking about how to get food into people's homes, to the home chefs, whether that's through the farmer's market and through a CSA, or even selling into grocery stores. But that's really only capturing half of the food dollars spent in the US. The other half are spent away from home. And I think if we're going to be serious about changing the way people eat, we really have to think about how do we get local, sustainable food into these places away from home where people are eating.
I think restaurants should kind of inspire the way people eat at home. They're kind of like an opportunity for people to go out and try something different and sort of have their horizons expanded, and then hopefully that informs the way they eat at home. So that's definitely something that I think is incredibly important, is trying to expand the way professional cooks think about food, and so that they can be leaders.
And I think we both Dave and I take a lot of inspiration from Alice Waters, the chef at Chez Panisse, who's really sort of like at the forefront of the farm to table movement. I know
she's my hero.
Yeah. The way that they cook and what they do at the restaurant has changed the way people eat, not only in the Bay Area of California, but it's rippled out across the nation and the world. And I was actually lucky enough to work for Bob Kennard, the farmer that she used for many, many years in the 80s and 90s at that restaurant. And so I was able to see how that relationship between a chef and a farmer can really not just give somebody like a nice dining experience, but kind of change the way that the food culture looks. This is just some of the numbers for our farm from 2014 and through last year. So when I started out in 2014, it was just me, and my friend Chris joined me midway through the season to help out on the farm, but we were really mostly just selling to farmers markets. So you can see like the green block there represents every year how much money we grossed at the farmers market. So that very first year we were doing 2 farmers markets, and that was it, and we made a little over $30,000 selling produce. And it was a great way to get out in the public and meet people. But I always, in the back of my mind, was like, I also want to have a CSA, and I want to meet some chefs. And so what you'll see from there, like going out over the years, year 2, we started a really small CSA. It was about like 20 to 25 members. And that's like the money that we brought in through the CSA is in the red block. And we were still at the 2 farmers markets. But after that first year, we had started meeting a few chefs around town. So we were making some restaurant sales, and mostly we were like just driving to the farmer's market and quickly dropping off on the restaurants on the way there. But I'm sure you all know the hustle at the farmer's market is real. You spend a lot of time picking, harvesting. You get to the market, you put out your beautiful produce, and a storm blows up, or there's a Bengals game going on, or whatever. I just felt like we were working really hard to earn that money, even though we were like showing up with beautiful produce. That customer involvement was dependent on a lot of things other than just like us showing up with our food. And so what we found, like I ended up dropping a farmer's market in 2016 and only doing 1 and expanding the CSA and then starting to sell to more restaurants. And what you can see now is we've totally eliminated farmer's market. and just focus on a CSA and restaurants. And I'll say that I think it really depends on your market, where you live. Like, farmers markets can be highly lucrative. I just felt like when I was starting out here in the Cincinnati area, the amount of labor that was going into the farmers market for the return made me choose to sort of move away from it. And one of the things that I love about working with restaurants is it's no waste harvest. Like, you're not picking things that may not get sold. You're working with the chefs ahead of time to figure out what they need, and you're harvesting exactly what they need. And so it's a much more efficient way. And you can see like how the bar graph has changed over the years. We really replaced that revenue from farmers market and even went beyond it by being able to diversify out into restaurant.
Yeah, I think
sales.
if there's like a hidden graph in here for you, which is ease and efficiency.
Yes.
And I think like I've known you. I moved here in 2015 or 2016,
yeah.
so I saw this change for you, and I definitely have heard that the ease and efficiency has increased as your sales have increased.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me, I don't know about your industry, but COVID had really made us rethink where we're expending our energy and making sure that it's bringing as many results back in as possible. So you were really practical with that, which is smart, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, not that we're talking about CSAs here, but you can see the huge jump in 2020 and 2021 in our CSA sales, and that was a huge demand due to COVID. But our restaurant sales really did not drop, even though the restaurant industry was hit really hard those years because the supply chain broke down in many ways. We had many chefs calling us up in 2020 saying, we want to go back to sourcing directly from farms rather than going through middlemen. And I think we were expecting our restaurant sales to dip, but it really did not happen for us. So, and it seems as though the demand for our product, not only with Dave, but other chefs around town, is growing. So it's like, we're just like struggling to meet the growing side of that, to be able to supply as many restaurants that want to work with us. So, yeah, so Dave sort of mentioned how we met, but I was at Findlay Market for the first few years of growing, and we always did a really nice display. That was something I learned when I was working in Seattle, and there's a ton of farms at the farmers market. You have to have a big, beautiful display to get people to come into your stall, and it worked. Dave was walking through the farm shed there at the market and stopped, and my friend Chris and I were working, and he's like, whoa, I need to meet you guys. And Dave's not the only person that we met that way. We met several chefs that way who I think like the chefs that are most interested in supporting local and using farm food, you're gonna see their faces out at the farmers market and at food events. And for me, that's the biggest way I've started to build relationships with chefs. Because then when I met Dave, he didn't have a restaurant yet, but you were working at Salazar at the time.
Salazar with Kate.
Yeah. And so he said to Andy, the chef de cuisine.
Oh, did I have him start buying your produce?
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
Yes. And then he went to work at Alley Bakery in Cincinnati and told Tom, the owner, about us, and we started selling there. And so what you find in the restaurant industry is that a lot of times you meet new clients because people move around to different restaurants, and if they like what you do and they like your product, they're gonna spread the word about you. The other thing is chefs talk to each other too, and I don't know what it's been like in your experience, but a lot of times we hear from somebody like, oh, I know Dave, or I know Shoshana from Branch, and she mentioned that you have the greatest produce and we really want to work with you. And so I think the smallest seed of a relationship can really grow into a lot of relationships within the restaurant industry.
But I always felt like what you did stood for itself. Like, I didn't really have to tell anybody. I was just very matter of fact. I was just like, Annie's growing the best produce in town. You need to buy her stuff. And I wasn't trying to do anything. It was just matter of fact. I was just sharing information. And so I think like at the core of it, and I'm sure this is one of our next slides, is the way that the line of things that you craft is just really, really the things that I want to cook and that I want to work with. And so it's sort of like the relationship started itself because the quality was so good.
And I think the point that you're making there too, Dave, is like, if you're going to start building relationships with restaurants and chefs, like you always have to put your best face out on the farm. That was really important to me when I was at the farmer's market. I wanted stuff to look good. I wanted it to be as fresh as possible. I wanted it to not be wilting down out there, because you don't want the first time somebody to walk by to see your stuff and be like, oh, that looks dirty, or that looks old, or I really don't want this totally shriveled down head of lettuce. And so I think always presenting, really beautiful, if you're going to be growing produce, whatever your product is, it needs to capture the eye of the customer, and that goes for restaurants as well. But I love those pictures. Those are in the early days when you were doing pop-up meals from your kitchen
top
at
left
home.
is in my house. Bottom right's at the Darkwood Farm 2.0.
2.0, yeah, in Petersburg.
Yep.
We did a farm dinner together. So the thing is that I'll say after that is, you're going to meet a lot of people sort of organically while you're like out at the farmer's market or through being at events and people seeing your food. The other option is, and I don't know how often people come into your restaurant with product, but you can cold call. You can go into restaurants with product and make sure the product looks great and just say, hey, I'm a farmer, here's my card, here's a sample of my products. And that has worked for me to some extent, but I would say, like, I'm off the top of my head, probably 80 to 85% of the clients I work with I've met through direct relationships rather than just like showing up on their doorstep with produce. But I don't know what it's like for you if people do that.
We have two different phenomena that happen. One is there's a couple of farmers who just literally show up with a truck. This doesn't happen that much. It is in a really fun way. It is effective because it's just sort of like very spontaneous. They show up with a truck and they say, hey, it's Friday, what do you want? And we all go out and look at the truck, and this is unplanned, and it's a little bit harder to work with, and it's probably less than ideal, but it does probably work for them a little bit. And then the other way is where you have an organized system that's happening. And in terms of the cold calling, I think we have certainly had lots of people drop by product and drop by business cards, and I think one of the most important things that is going on here is you have to be organized on the back end as a farmer to maintain and build out that relationship. You can drop off a great bag of whatever, but what it makes me want to take the next step is understanding that you have the organizational structure to make it so I can use your food all year round. Like, you might have mushrooms, but what's your supply chain like? If I place a standing order with you, can you fulfill it? I think like the organizational structure is what really enables like a long-term relationship, and I think is what we're going to talk about next. But like, one of the most important things that I think Annie does that's incredible is that she thinks about her business model through the lens of me as a professional cook. So the way that things are communicated is very, very thorough. She's planning ahead. She's letting me know what's coming down the line. And whether you're going to cold call or however, that's what's going to show me that I can engage in a long-term producer relationship with you. Whereas, like, I honestly get a lot of people who just, they call and they say, hey, we're producing mushrooms, or because mushrooms are very hot right now. I don't know if you know. You probably know that. It seems like every 2 months we have a new person which is amazing, because 3 years ago there was not as high a level of mushrooms. I'm sure you remember, Kate. Now we've got, Ramon is doing incredible, what is it called, mycelio culture? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's really growing. But like, so what people will drop off things, and if you do a little investigating, really quickly you can figure out like that they don't really have the structure in place to make it work. And so we kind of like don't engage there.
Yeah, I think, Mary Kate.
Can you elaborate that for a chef, not having the structure in place, does that mean like the continuous supply of certain crops, or is it more about like having a fresh sheet that arrives at a predictable time?
I guess like that they're taking it very seriously and professionally, and that it's thought out and it's planned. I think there's a way that you can approach farming, which is totally wonderful, but it's harder to work with as a restaurant, where you're sort of like a home farmer that's, you know, like you grow some tomatoes, but then you don't have anything next week. And so it's more of like a casual approach when it's very, very thought out and it's very intentional and you're approaching it like in a very, very professional manner. Does that, I don't mean to use professional as like a qualifier, but like,
I can say though, you are very flexible about seasonality, and like Dave understands, and there's a certain group of chefs that are really flexible with things coming in and out of season, and then there's other people that are not. And then I think that dictates like what you would offer to those different restaurants. But yeah, like I think probably by the time I met you, I was already doing the fresh sheet, which is a way that I communicate with chefs, and we'll go over it, but that kind of is showing the chef, hey, we do have things every week. We're gonna communicate with you in a timely and systematic way that kind of melds with your weekly schedule through the restaurant so that we can get the product to you in a timely manner. And I'll go through the fresh sheet kind of here in the next couple of minutes, but this isn't the only way you can do it. There's lots of ways to do it. This is just the way that has evolved for me over the last few years that seems to be pretty successful with the chefs that we work with. Did you have a question?
Yes, as a chef, how would you prefer to have somebody approach the restaurant? In other words, first contact? I mean, I don't know if you go knock at the back door or...
well, so this is something that's, yeah, this is a great question. It's one of our next slides, I'm pretty sure. Number one recommendations, don't come during peak hours. So never show up during a dinner shift. So main lunch shift is usually gonna end at 2 o'clock. Dinner's usually gonna start at 5. You either wanna come at the prep period before a lunch rush, so that would be like 10 to 11:30, or you wanna come from like 2 to 4. So, and don't come on a Friday or a Saturday for the most part, because those are the peak days in a restaurant. And this is, again, what I was talking about with Annie that's so wonderful, is that she's thinking about what like as a hospitality professional, my job is to think about what my guest experience is like and sort of preempt their needs. What I think is so wonderful about the way she operates is she thinks about my experience and preempts my needs. So I would say Wednesday, Thursday are really, really good days because you're leading up into a busy week, but you're not overwhelmed yet. Don't come, also look at the schedule of when people are offering service. You know, if they are closed for lunch but open for dinner, then you could come at 2 and that would be great. So doing your homework is really, really important. And also, you know, look online, see if you can find the name of who the chef is and ask for that person by name. That's always really cool. But you just want to ask for whoever the chef is.
Online contact?
If you just go to the website of the establishment, very often it'll be listed who's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you come at a smart time and just ask for the chef.
Just go up to the front counter and ask for the
The worst move is showing up at 5:30 on a Friday. That's just, if you want to just show that you're really not connected and you're really checked out, you're going to do that. Unless there's a certain farmer in town whose name is Sally. She's the exception to the rule. She shows up at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock on Friday night with a truck full of stuff.
Yeah.
But again, her food is wonderful, so
Yes.
she manages to pull it off. I don't know how she
she's
pulls it
amazing.
off.
I remember
Yeah,
Shoshana, one of the other chefs that we work with in town, had told me, I'm so glad you come and drop off when you do. And she loves Sally and loves her stuff, but she's like, one time Sally dropped off at 1 a.m. some eggs on my doors at my house. So, I mean, you know, you can make exceptions, I think, for some people like that, but at the same time, I would say too, like if you were to just reach out via email, a lot of times I'm just guessing that probably gets shuffled way down low on the priority list.
You want to see a face, and you want to offer something that you think is immediately potentially usable in the product line of what that place is offering. So like do your homework. Look at the menu that's being offered. You know, if it's a vegetarian restaurant, don't bring beef. right? Like, so, like you have to do your homework. I think it's one of the most important parts about that process. That way, the offering that you make is as close as possible to what's already in line with what they're doing. And if you can fill a void, hey, I was looking at your menu. I saw that you're running a pork chop dish. I have some really incredible bok choy. I think it'd be incredible in your pork dish. Sweet. Like,
Yeah.
you've already assisted me in my menu planning without me even realizing it. That's the kind of preparation that I think it really, really makes an impact.
And I would say one of the things that I think it may have been Ben Hartman, you know, the lean farmer that I read it, I might be wrong. You know, one of the things that he does is he actually just like asks the chef when's the best time to check in with you, and then like plugs it into his phone, like a reminder, you know, like, oh, this is when Dave likes to get contacted. That's one way of doing it. And I think that that is going to increase your success of getting an order back from that chef, because they're super busy. I'm like, he's going to run off to the restaurant after this because his chef de cuisine is on vacation and be, you know, like farmers, chefs are often pulling 70, 80-hour work weeks. So the time that you have with them is limited, so make it count and try and target your communication to them at a time that makes sense.
And also, don't feel shy following up.
Yeah.
Because of the level of overwhelm, repeated communications very often are required. Like Annie's order deadline is what, Monday at 8?
Well, yeah.
She has an order deadline.
Tuesdays at 6, yeah.
But she literally has a reminder in her phone to contact every one of her major ordering people the next morning to remind them. And it's not like a diss. She just understands that sometimes we forget. And so I'm like incredibly grateful for that. So a follow-up is actually like a really, really good thing. I think sometimes we feel like a sense of rejection, but following up in a conscious way is actually really helpful.
Yeah.
Mary?
Yeah?
No, you're good.
No,
Did I
this is
answer your
great.
question earlier?
Yeah, yeah.
I felt like maybe I didn't.
Andy, I was wondering, when you are working with a new restaurant,
Yeah.
along the lines of feeling okay, asking for something, or like reminding someone, if you get orders that are like 5 heads of lettuce and 2 bunches of radishes,
Yeah.
smaller volume.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, I've heard of some people doing, like, there's a delivery charge
Yeah.
for orders under a certain amount. Do you
Yeah.
set that up to
Yeah.
establish that expectation from
Yeah.
the beginning?
Yeah, and I'll show you, because we'll go through the fresh sheet, but I put that out there, but I have to remind people of that too. And sometimes I'll make an exception if the order, and we had it's probably too low. Like I do a $30 minimum order. It should probably be 50 or more. But because we are like Dave's restaurant is near to other people. If people are ordering a good order from me every week, but then they have a slow week and they only want a few things, I will make an exception for that. But what you don't want to do is set up a relationship where people are only ordering trying to order $20 worth of stuff from you every time. Yes.
That's really good. Yeah. Can I expand on that too as well? So just for an industry comparative, in all of my liquor distributors, this is $200 minimum. And so everyone's used to that. And so frankly, if you were to walk into my place and just be like, and if your offerings were beautiful and incredible and it's a $200 minimum, I wouldn't blink, because it's industry standard. So like, look at that difference, $20 to $200. Like, I think that's, you would, 50?
Yeah.
Not even out of the question at all. I don't think I've ever placed a $50 order from you. It's always. But on the.
Work out, like, Annie asking, what are the things that I can grow for you?
Oh yeah, this is the next thing I was going to talk about, and this is going on further. But I think the energy of collaboration is what's unbelievably vital here, because what I think, where I would like to see the culture in Cincinnati grow is that a cook doesn't order 2 bunches of radishes. They engage in a relationship with the farmer. I think that is where we need to grow to, and if I could sort of wave a magic wand for myself in 5 years, I'll figure out a way to like start to change this a little bit, because that doesn't help you.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help the clientele, because they're getting one item that's seasonal. And so I think having an energy of collaboration with the people that you choose to sell to is really important, because then you're interweaving your food into their menu. And I think that's when you get the fiscal benefits of actually selling more stuff, but then they get the benefits of actually engaging with a real farmer in a real way, a meaningful way.
Yeah.
So I think the energy of collaboration, I can't stress it enough. And that means, like, so for example, like Are we going to talk about this next?
I don't know.
I guess we're going.
Yeah,
I guess we're kind of going to.
I'll just jump through this real quick, and then we've got a lot of that, like kind of towards the end. But just the way that I do it, I normally send my fresh sheet out on Sunday nights, and so weekends are busy for chefs. So what I want on Monday, which is their down day, or most restaurants are closed on a Monday, I want them when they open their inbox on Monday to have an email from me. If you send it too much earlier in the week, and they go through their weekend rush, they're gonna forget that Annie sent that list of what's available on the farm 4 days ago. So I really try to have that pop up in their inboxes on Monday, because a lot of times ordering is happening on Mondays and Tuesdays for the upcoming cycle. And for us, depending on the size of your farm and what your staffing is, I really need to get those orders by Tuesday night. And I say Tuesday at 6 o'clock so that at 6 o'clock I can text Dave and or call or email, depending on how people like to communicate. I like to give myself maybe an hour on a Tuesday evening to check in with people, and they almost immediately respond back. Oh my God, I forgot to send in my order.
Every time.
Here it is. And I would say your total orders, half of my orders come in when I do that Tuesday at 6 o'clock check-in. And I would say Tuesday at 6 is not a terrible time to touch base with people. They might have a dinner service, but in general, most people get back to me right away around that time. And then we need, as a crew, Wednesday to harvest everything into Thursday morning. And even if people are sending you their orders on a Monday or earlier on Tuesday, you can get an early start on some of the harvest. And
I also think it's important, if it's a deadline, and I have broken this rule with Annie, and there's been a lot of times where I've not gotten any food. Sometimes she's kind to me and she'll just send me what I got the previous week because she knows what I'm about. But if you have a deadline and they don't meet the deadline and they call you 24 hours later, it's gonna screw your world up.
It really does.
Trying to harvest last minute, do all this stuff. They just don't get food. You have to people will take the leash as long as you give it to them. So if you have a deadline, it's a friggin' deadline.
Yeah.
And if you hold it strong, they're gonna respect it next time, and you have to make them respect it. Otherwise, it's just gonna be constant people yanking on your time and ruining your workflow, which is really, really important in every world.
Yeah, and I would say that, especially given the nature of farming, as you all know, if there's a thunderstorm all day Wednesday, you're kind of screwed. Okay, 15 minutes. All right, we'll keep going. But anyway, the way that I structure the fresh sheet, I start out by giving a little hey, here's what's going on the farm. Here's a pretty picture to get you interested. Here's what we have. I really try to push. This is what we have a lot of right now. Signaling to the chef, this is in abundance. You can get this for a while. And then here are the things that are coming soon, and then things that we expect later in the season. So this one was a fall fresh sheet that I sent out. So I was trying to just set people up for, hey, in the next week or two, we're gonna have broccoli rabe and escarole, but even later in the season, we're gonna have all this other stuff. Because then it's they're what do I want this week? What do I want in the next couple weeks? But then I'm thinking about the winter menu, what's coming up then.
And something that this is a revelation as of year 3 of Annie and I working together, is I started saying to her, one of the hardest things for me, Annie, is when you have enough product for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because the way that I structure menus, it's gone a couple different ways. For a while, we would change the menu once a month. So there was a menu that lasted a full month, and then it flipped over. And so the challenge that I would run into with seasonal produce ordering was let's say I put on a dish with broccoli rabe, but you only have enough for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So then I have to truncate my menu planning. And so one of the things that I've talked to her about, and I think is really, really important to try to think about, and I'm not a farmer, so I don't understand this, is extending your growing cycle as long as you can. Maybe that means you plan at different times, but thinking, if I'm gonna get a product on, can I keep it for a minimum of 2 or 3 weeks at a steady level? And I know that's hard because Kentucky's seasonality is rapid. Strawberries come and gone in 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are really challenging, but if you can just say to yourself, is it possible for me to extend this to 4 weeks, is ideal for us. Because then we can plan for it, think of it, engage with it, get into an ordering and a prep cycle with it, The really hard stuff is when it's in and out in a week. So anything that can be done to extend that, I think, is huge.
And a lot of that's going to come into just setting up your succession plantings to make sure that you will be able to carry a product for a month, especially one that's really like susceptible to weather changes. But also, like, you know, if I'm like, hey, I've got garlic scapes, but I will be very clear, like, you got like a week or two and that's it. So that they know, right? Like, get it while they can, but it's not going to be able to necessarily be on the menu for a whole month. So I'd say it doesn't like exclude that you're like, oh, like you get excited about some things that are really quick, but at the same time, like you can't structure a menu around that.
Yeah, because it's just too hard to I mean, we change our menu every week a little bit, but that's kind of really difficult, and most people probably won't do that.
Yeah. And I would say, like, I don't really give a huge discount to restaurants. I do similar pricing to what I used to do at the farmer's market, but I do give case prices. Like, you know, you're buying 12, you get one bunch free. And I also encourage people to put in an order of $100 or more, they get a 5% discount. And so like, there's setting an order minimum, but there's also ways to encourage people like, hey, go ahead and order 12 of these, because then you get a case price, or go ahead and order $100 because then you're gonna get 5% off your order. And then it's like, then it makes it worth my while to make the stop. And so I think there's like both ways of looking at that. And then like at the bottom of every fresh sheet, I say how to get in contact with me, and I would say like, every chef is different. Some wanna text, some wanna email. Most of them don't really want to call, but that's fine. I'm open to like them calling with their order.
Text is pretty good.
Yeah, and then I would say like if you have that deadline, check in with them at the deadline, because and most people, sometimes they're like, hey, we had a slow week, we don't want anything, but it's never like, oh God, you checked in with me. They're like, oh, thanks for checking in, but we're good this week. And it's definitely worth the check-in.
And something that, and Annie and I, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I think, so she delivers on Thursday. Mm-hmm. If you're going only one day a week, I'd say like, in my mind, Wednesday is the best day. Mm-hmm. Thursday is also okay. You want to try to, if you're thinking about, there's like a flow that's happening. You're building up, Friday and Saturday are your peak days, and then you're on like the decline. If you can, you want to be supplying on the front end of that cycle. So like Wednesday or Thursday, I think are the best days for delivery. Also, I think, and I dropped this to her, Wednesday, Friday would be the best, because then you have the front end load delivery, and then you got busier than you thought you would, and you have like a second drop off towards the weekend. I think that's my wish list. that would be the best.
It just depends on what else you're doing on the farm. Like the farm I worked for in Seattle did twice a week in the peak of the season. Wednesdays and Fridays, and they would only do Wednesdays in the sort of like slower season. But for us, because we're a small farm and limited staff and, you know, delivery time, we generally just do once a week. And then sometimes it's like, I'll be in town and somebody needs something last minute. Sometimes we can make that work, but it's not like, we're not like pledged to doing that.
Yeah.
And then this is just the way that, what I do is I have this spreadsheet, and I have like everything on the left is like what we have available on the farm. And as the orders come in, every restaurant gets a column. And so that also like helps me to see who hasn't ordered yet, that had ordered in the last couple weeks, so that I know who to check in with. And then we fill that out completely. And then that's our pick list like on Wednesdays for the farm. And so then we have a total number of like bunches of kale or bunches of dandelion or whatever, so that we're like just inefficiencies. Like you don't want to be like, oh, somebody ordered 5 dandelion, go get that. And then 3 hours later, somebody ordered 7. I'm okay, go get that. Like we wait until we have all the orders in, and then we do it all at once, pick out all the same things at once, clean it all at once, and then pack into the separate. So there's lots of ways of doing that, but this is a helpful way. And then we like mark off as soon as the stuff goes into like Dave's tote, we mark it off with a little dot.
And it's worth noting that I specially requested to Annie no single-use plastics in our deliveries. So she brings everything in reusable totes. Mm-hmm. As soon as she walks in the front door, our kitchen has an understanding. We stop what we're doing, and everybody loads things into our in-house bus tubs. and then she gets her totes back, I really felt disingenuous that local produce was coming in single-use plastic. Unfortunately, like if you do work through Local Food Connection, they require it, which I can't stand, but it's really hard to find a way around. So if you are engaging one-on-one, I think like setting up that arrangement of like, I think that's ideal, is that you don't use plastic bags. Because like growing organic produce and then it's a little bit of a...
And we have, everybody likes it different. Like I'm totally on the vibe with Dave. Like, let's not use a bunch of plastic if we don't need to. And so we have our reusable totes that we deliver, and they come back to the farm and they get sanitized and then reused the next week. But some people do require plastic bagging, and that's just, you have to, and the kitchens are so different. Some people are totally chaotic and unorganized, and a lot of times then I will put the stuff in the bag so that we can just be like, here you go. Like, I'm not going to wait around for you to like take it out of our tote or whatever. Yeah. And so it's really getting a feel for what everybody's kitchens are like. And then kind of trying to keep that in mind when you're packing in the pack shed. Like, Dave really doesn't like plastic. We're not going to use that, but we have to do it for another restaurant that really needs it. And then this is just going back to what Dave was saying, is like, don't show up during Saturday brunch if it's a Saturday brunch spot with your delivery. Like, we try to deliver on Thursdays when it's not so chaotic, and you really have to think about whether the place is a breakfast lunch place or a dinner place. And so if it's a breakfast lunch place, we try to get there at the end of lunch service. So like we work with Sleepy Bee Oakley and they close at 2. So we try to get there at like 2:15 or 2:30 when people are still in the kitchen, but they're not worrying about service anymore and they can take the product and put it away. But for like dinner service, we try to get there early when we can, 11 or 12. And then if we know something's going on chaotic on the farm and we're going to be late, we try to communicate that as early as we know that we're going to be late so that they're ready for us when we get there. So I think all of that is super important. And then just like when you meet a chef talking about, hey, do you have a kitchen door, a delivery door? Because sometimes they don't want you walking through the dining room, with your product. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're like, oh yeah, let the customers see that the farmer's here. And then just like also figuring out if you're driving a giant farm truck, like ask about, is there a special parking spot or delivery area and things like that I can leave the vehicle while I unload. And then I do like very simple invoicing. I use these like carbon copy, like 2-part handwritten invoices. And so Dave or the Pickled Pig or whoever who's ordering from us gets the top copy, and this is what you ordered. And then I keep a yellow copy. Some people will want to write you a check right then. Some people want you to charge a credit card, like through Square or whatever credit card vendor you use. Some people send that into their accountant and then you get a check 2 weeks later. So it's really important that you stay organized. And for me, like the carbon copy, I like put it in a stack if it's paid, and then the unpaid ones sit there because sometimes you got to check back in with people and say, hey, I didn't get your check yet. Yeah. What's the hold up with that?
And one thing that I'll say, and she's very clearly articulated that not everyone is like me, but having a strategy where you can receive a credit card number and run a payment as soon as it comes, I think is the greatest thing in the world. Because number one, you get paid immediately. You don't ever have to worry about hunting somebody down, and I don't have to remember. So like, you definitely need to have an auto pay option where you can receive and store a credit card, because it makes it, not everybody wants to do it, but it's really good strategy.
Yeah, honestly, like we prefer to get paid on delivery or be able to run a credit card right away, because like following up with, and that's the more corporate restaurants generally send you a check within 2 to 4 weeks, and it's like a pain in the ass when they don't pay you, and then you have to figure out the corporate accountant you got to contact to get that sucks paid. So
that's like assuming that if you're operating at a larger structure where you can manage to have 2 weeks of cash flow delayed.
Yeah. And you can set those boundaries too. You can just say like, we require cash on delivery or check on delivery.
A lot of people do.
And then I would say like the really important part is that not just that you like create this relationship and you start delivering to the restaurants, but maintain the relationships. And this can look different, but like, I mean, Dave's been out to the farm so many times, like just personal and professional visits. That's his crew up there on the right a couple years ago coming out to help plant onions. like, it's not just important to engage with the chef, but the whole staff, front of house and back of house. Like, it makes a huge difference if your wait staff at the restaurant knows about your farm and can talk about your farm. And when the person is ordering, you know, when you have a client ordering, that the entire staff is like engaged with what you do on the farm. It's really gonna sell more product for you and create this sort of like, I don't know, you know, environment within the restaurant where people like feel like, oh, I'm supporting a farm at the same time as this restaurant.
Yeah, I think staff outings for if you are able to establish, you know, collaborative relationships are so cool. It's something that I try to do twice a year. It's hard to pull off. It's probably going to be a Monday or a Tuesday, you know. But like if that's something that like works at your establishment, and I think it's really. It's probably the best thing I can think of is the entire team comes out, because when you touch the soil, you know, Annie always gives us a tour and she's like, oh, so this is the rapini. The team gets to see food in the ground. It's a transformative experience for people, and I think it honestly like changes their lives, and we have 5 minutes left.
Okay, 5 minutes. Yeah, we do a lot of cross promotion too on social media. So like this is one of Dave's menus, beautifully surrounded by farm produce, a lot of which is ours or produce from other farms. And so they're posting that on social media. It takes 2 seconds to repost and support them, spread the word about the restaurants that are buying from you. I think also like we have a pretty big CSA clientele, so we try to tell them about the restaurants that we sell to, because not only do they want to eat our food every week from their CSA box, but they also want to go out and eat. And so a lot of times I've had my CSA members say, I went and tried the Baker's Table for the first time, or Bouquet, or wherever, because I saw that you guys are selling there. So I think that's super important to do. It's really like low-hanging fruit to do that. And then I think also setting up a time, especially as you're going into the winter, when restaurants, like past the holiday season, you know, when it's not as busy, like set a time to go into the restaurant and crop plan. Like talk to Dave, talk to whoever about what are the things you really liked last year that you would want more of? What are some things that you are trying to source locally that you don't have? And just have that conversation. I think it really helps set yourself up for success. And sometimes it's really important for setting expectations. Like I've had farmers ask for certain things that I'm like, oh, that just doesn't grow well in our climate, you know, like, but they don't know. I mean, they're not farmers. And so you really have to have those conversations. And I would say like emphasizing what you grow well, and not, like I'm willing to try new things and new varieties for people, but it's always like, this is gonna be a trial basis. I'm not gonna invest a huge amount of space in the garden until we like give it a try this year and see how it turns out.
I think this is worth re-emphasizing, this thing that Annie does where it's like, usually it's right after Valentine's Day, right? It's like the last big holiday of the holiday season, and there's like this dead zone. I think it's about when we do it. Usually it's January.
January, February, March,
cool.
somewhere in there, yeah.
In the cold winter dead zone, she calls up and she says, hey, let's have a talk. Let's dream together. Let's talk about food. And so we get together, and she just very openly solicits feedback. What worked? What didn't work? What do you want more of next year? What do you foresee your needs being next year? How can we, so she engages in the planning process. I would never think to do this. Never. But every time it happens, I'm like, gosh, that was really fantastic. And it fine-tunes our offerings for the next year. It fine-tunes her being able to line up with us so I can buy more of what she's doing because it works for me. Like, oh, you know, actually, this variety of cutting celery is completely useless for us. We can't use it. And she's like, oh, really? I didn't know that. You know, so
yeah.
It's outrageously important.
And you can do it a little bit in snippets when you deliver, but there's a lot of times your time is limited. So we have like a minute or two for you to be like, oh, we tried this thing and it really didn't work out, or we're really looking for this, and you can like quickly get feedback. But yeah, I think setting a like more extended period of time when you can sit down for an hour or two and have that like longer conversation.
And also she wants feedback. So like in the kitchen, if like I remember I was just cutting into some turnips and they were like really, really woody because they just bolted. And I thought they were gonna be okay, but my knife was getting stuck in the center of the turnip, and I just sent her a picture, and I was just like, turnip's not working. And she's like, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
There's no arguing, no like, it's your fault, you don't know how to cook them. She wants the feedback. There's no resistance. And for me to be able to have an open channel is like vital, because I know she's not fighting me and she cares and she's listening, and I can be honest, like, hey, this thing really sucked. Like, you shouldn't sell this. And,
Yeah.
oh, cool, thank you. And then, you know, it's going to come off my bill next time, or she
Yep.
actions it. It doesn't just disappear.
Yeah, in that case, a lot of times if you can't tell a radish is pithy, like, you know, you can sort of tell, right? But like, it's not until they cut into it that there's,
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, you gotta remember not to pick from that patch, like that was too pithy, communicate it to the staff, but also say, I'm really sorry about that. We can bring you a replacement, or we can give you credit. You know, like, you know, I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but you want to know when your product isn't looking good, so that it's not like Dave every week being like, we're getting these crappy radishes over and over again. It's
Because
like,
then we stop buying from you.
Right,
The team starts
exactly.
grumbling about you, and they're just like, oh, we should stop buying from Darkwood Farm, and the radishes suck. That's what happens. And so being honest about feedback prevents that. And I just thought of one thing, and this is not me advertising anything, but we've collaborated together to make a seasonal food calendar.
I'll go ahead, and I know we're getting
Ooh,
to
we
the
have
end of
it.
time. Yeah, hold on.
This is not me trying to sell anything, but this is an amazing resource to give, or for, I'll give one to every restaurant in town. I don't even care, because I want people to know this, because I'm so sick of seeing cherry tomatoes in January on a seasonal restaurant menu. It's not real. It's just not real. And so this has got every month, and it's got every product that I've seen produced in this region with its harvest series. And there's also a cold storage that shows, like, you know, apples you can get for a long time, right? So like, this in the hands of the whoever's writing the menu is like a big deal. And you write your own, great. I think
Yeah.
that you can buy them through Local Food Connection. Great.
Yeah.
I will give them to you if it means we help cooks to think better about food, because that's like, they have to know, I can't get asparagus in January. I'm gonna get asparagus in what, like 2 weeks?
Yeah.
When's it
Anytime
coming?
now.
Yeah.
If you have asparagus.
Ramps just hit last week. You know, so for a cook to understand the cycle of nature and understand how growing actually works is actually the most important first step in this whole process. So they need to be educated.
And I just want to say, because I know we're coming to close on time, like, not everybody that you work with is as flexible as Dave. Dave is like who you want to work with, who's really into seasonal and supporting farms and not putting cherry tomatoes on salads in January. And there's varying levels, right, of that. But like, I would say that it's worth working with everybody, but really cultivating, like Dave, there's a couple other chefs that we work with in town who are very similar. They put in big orders. They really support the farm. They really put their menu oriented around seasonal food, and it pays off. Like, his restaurant has won awards for being best new restaurant. What was that, a couple of years ago? Eater magazine, and was it USA Today? Like, the food is transcendent. When that's a huge reason that chefs want to work with local farms. And I think keeping in mind that you want to send your tastiest, best stuff to them, and it's going to lift like all of our boats. They're going to get more clientele. They're going to spend more money with the farms buying our product. It's just going to create this culture where people want to go out and eat, and they want to eat farm food, and they want to learn what seasonal is. And I know are we out of time? Okay. If you guys have more questions, because we skipped over a few things, you know, I'm here all day. And yeah, well, Mary Kate, do you have a?
Do we need to convene in the hallway for the next place? Because we can chat with Mary Kate outside.
Yeah, we're just about got to clear out.
So Annie and I will meander in the hallway. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.